it's an interesting juxtaposition, and kind of from where we started, where we were saying who goes to a protest, right? A person that doesn't feel progress in their own life. But our government just told, at least in the United States, millions and millions and millions of people, you aren't essential. Your work moving forward isn't important. It is actually the opposite of important. It is non-essential. And so, I mean, you have to imagine that people are going to internalize these messages, in large part because if I internalize it, then I get to be safe from this disease. And by being safe, yes, I give away my agency, my desire and ability to go out and do things for myself. But I also now get to be a receiver as opposed to a builder or a creator.
Yeah, absolutely, Vince. Yeah, it's very, very true. And this, the whole essential service kind of thing, I think has been a little bit too much of a reality check for a lot of people that maybe taken it the wrong way. But one very important thing I'd like to bring to the table about essential services, we get even the government deeming what's essential and what's not, right down to, a lot of meat packing plants in southern Alberta that handle, basically over half of the Canadian beef supply. As
people don't realize Alberta is like the Montana / Texas. I don't know, cattle ranching central. Alberta is huge.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba, and even parts of BC are huge in commercial grade beef for food supply, right? And yeah, it's like Alberta. I think a lot of people, in Ontario and a few other places don't realize that what they're eating on their shelves is actually coming from, a cargill plant in High River or Brooks, right? They handle a lot of the beef that we eat here as Canadians, and that actually you guys eat as Americans as well. A lot of it goes south over the border. So we've got a person. Listen to this. We got a person in a beef packing plant that's deemed essential service. And we have a federal government that runs our country that has refused to resume parliament.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point.
How essential are we? You're the ones that are running the country, and you've deemed yourself not essential? Well, does that mean that we really need you then?
Yeah, I think maybe they're not running the country. There's a guy named Eric Weinstein that talks a whole bunch, and he said something that really made a lot of sense to me. He said, we basically have not been at war or had an existential crisis for the last 50 years. And because of that, we started selecting our politicians for things other than we need you to govern or protect us from ourselves. In fact, what we ended up doing was we selected an actor class of people, and you could go back to Reagan, Trump. They're essentially actors fulfilling this role of, I will keep enough tension in the politics that will keep your attention and make you feel like we're moving forward. But in fact, we were not prepared at all for the invasion that was COVID-19. We've been completely overrun. I don't know how you guys are in Canada, but like we're now in, you could call it quarantine, or you could call it like protection from the enemy, because we were just completely overrun.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing here. And I think, there's Saskatchewan was actually the first province to declare a state of emergency and shut down non-essential services. But the thing was there was a lot of modeling of what could and was going to happen that happened at the time. That didn't really come into its full fruition of what the modeling had assumed that it would. And so now you see a lot of provinces here are now gradually starting to reopen their economies and a few different things. But yeah, it's very interesting, specifically when people look at the government's doing the best that they could with the situation that was at hand. I don't know if people know this out there, but there are actually a very, very large amount of tax dollars in Canada. I'm sure it would be the same thing in the US, that there's actually policies and planning and a lot of things that people are paid very, very well within the government to have policies and plans and emergency response plans and pandemic plans in place and updated for when these things happen, so that when they do happen, you basically just go to the policy. It's just like a health and safety manual of Canada kind of thing. These are written, and there's people that are paid very good money. There's even a gentleman that I know in Alberta that actually works for the Alberta government, that a part of his strategic emergency planning in Alberta and his government job is to plan for a mass mortality rate and how they would store bodies in the case of a pandemic or a global disaster or something like that. And this is 5 years ago that he's telling me what he does for the government, and I'm like, you do what? He's like, yeah, that's my job, is to plan for this stuff. So to all Canadians and probably Americans out there that are watching this, there's people that are paid very good money to make sure that there is a plan in place when this stuff happens. So when this stuff does happen and everyone's trying to support what's being done and be like, well, they're doing the best that they can with what they've got. No, they're supposed to have a plan for this. We've paid them to have a plan for this. And this is the part where you execute said plan, and it's just like, when it happens, everything just gets thrown out the window. We don't close borders. We don't do a whole bunch of other things. And it turns into just kind of a little bit of a free for all off the start. And now we've got ourselves all locked down in a bunch of places with a leader of a country that just comes out of his cottage for a few minutes in the morning, does an address to the country, gives out a couple $2 billion to a few people, and then goes back into his cottage. And that's all you see or hear till the next day kind of thing. It's very concerning.
Yeah, that is really weird. You're in particular Canada. Every time I see Trudeau, it's like he's coming out of his house to like be like, "Hey, it reminds me of somebody being at like the Palace of Versailles, coming out, making some decisions, and then going back into their palace." And I realized Versailles wasn't used in that way, but that's what it seems like, right? It seems like, what are you doing in there? It's your government, so you guys can do whatever you want, but it doesn't seem like the people that are building things are also the ones in charge. And I think the essential versus non-essential, the thing about at least in the US, was if you decided you were essential, because nobody stopped you. It was like basically giving a card to everyone and saying, if you want to cash it in and stay inside and not do anything and shelter away, you can. And all the other people just got up and started working. Those are the people that should be in charge right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the big thing, and I'm definitely, there's a lot of great people that work very hard in government organizations, but it's just a pretty sore spot with me when you get people that are making decisions for a nation that have a guaranteed pension, that they're not going to be affected financially month to month whatsoever, whether they stay in their cottage or whether they don't show up, or if they sit in front of their computer and Zoom with somebody for 15 minutes on a debate on something for the day. It's just that if people aren't financially affected by this, they're going to have no reason whatsoever to try and expedite things going back to some way, shape, or form of normal. It'd be very easy for somebody who was not financially affected to just be able to say, no, we're going to stay on lockdown for another 6 months just to let this pass. Okay, well, I know you're going to be okay off of tax dollars with your federal pension and paycheck and everything. I know you're going to be fine, so you can sit there and say, yeah, well, it's no big deal. It's really not that big of a deal, right? Actually, I kind of like working from home. I just can, I can have my pajama pants on and walk down my stairs once a day and do an address for 10 minutes, avoid all the questions that are being asked of me, not give an answer directly to any of the questions that are being asked of me, and then just go back into my hole and hide there for a little while longer kind of thing. Whereas you have people that are like, okay, I can't make my rent payment this month. I haven't even thought about next month and how am I supposed to buy groceries kind of thing. And you're telling me, no, we're just going to sit tight and wait this out. It doesn't work for a lot of people, right? And that's where you're saying like essential services. Yes. What is essential and what's not essential? A lot is essential. And eventually, like, I'm glad that we're starting to reopen some things here in Saskatchewan, and we're going to continue down that path. They're doing a very great job here. The government is of managing what's happening. Plus, the population is doing really well with social distancing and making sure that everyone's conscious of what's going on. And I mean, that's what it's going to take, is a mindset of people to be like, hey, no, we need to get going, and here's how we're going to get going, versus just, okay, well, here's some money to keep you satiated for a little while. We're just going to leave you there locked down for a little while longer. That kind of doesn't work.
Yeah, I think that people that are advocating for the lockdowns more and more, or want to stay longer, or want to do the porn of, look at how much fun that group of people are having, they shouldn't be doing that. That's a threat to us. Like if you saw those Ozark things. But
I've seen some of that, yeah.
I think that you're exactly right. Like if people are made to feel the pain of what is going on, suddenly that pain tells you, okay, I got to get away from doing that thing that I was doing, sitting at home, hiding, sheltering, and I got to do something smart. But if you keep them away from that pain, then of course they're going to go do the Ozarks thing, right? They're like, hey,
Yeah,
I've been stuck here. There's been no problem. Why not just do this? So we're doing everyone a disservice by not exposing them to the harm that can be here.